innovation, internalization, and integration of value chains and clusters of the companies in the region. To tell us about the contributions of CAF as a partner bank in Latin America and the Caribbean, we would like to invite Mr. Antonio Pinheiro Silveira, Infrastructure Vice President of CAF, who will share with us his presentation.
Buenos días, señoras y señores.
Good morning. Apologies from our president, Sergio Diaz-Canado, who could not make it here because he had a previous commitment. So I'm replacing him in this presentation. It is always a pleasure to come to Cartagena and to be in touch with the poor community. I was a minister of transport in Brazil a long time ago. So I would like to start here trying to answer two questions. Some very regular questions for those who are not from Colombia. First, what is CAF? And two, why CAF? Why this acronym for the Development Bank of Latin America? So very briefly, CAF corresponds to Corporación Andina de Fomento. It's like the Andean Promoting Corporation. And the double purpose was to develop sustainable development of the Andean subregion and the integration of the Andean subregion. In its 51 years of existence, CAF has grown a lot. Today, it has 19 member countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, a volume of loans for over $32 billion. Mainly, this deals with infrastructure, economic and social aspects. The infrastructure vice presidency deals with economic infrastructure, and we deal with logistics, transport, infrastructure, telecommunications, energy, and urban mobility. The topic today is going to be a combination of logistics and infrastructure. First, because when we speak about infrastructure, the topic is not only works, it's actually service. Obviously, works are still very important, mainly when there is economic recovery like the one we have to go through now. But in the long term, what matters for development are the services provided, mainly in the transport scope. But as we saw in the previous panel, digital transformation is very strong when it comes to logistics. So to join transport and logistics in a port environment is the adequate formula. And I'm also going to underscore the topic of CAF contribution with its instruments in logistics and also in ports, but more from the planning and knowledge standpoint. But I'm also going to mention something about loans. Infrastructure, logistics, and development. The core topic behind this is the concept of connectivity. Mainly market connectivity, whether it is national or international markets. So this is extremely important because at the end of the day, what we call market requires the movement of cargo from one side to the next, and we are not in medieval times when people went to the towns to barter goods. So we are speaking of networks, and these networks are very important. We need to understand their dynamics and to see how can we leverage everything from the networks. We are in a region which I'm going to show shortly, which has an important delay when it comes to connectivity and also when it comes to integrity, with integration. So I'm going to start with two graphs. The first one, it shows the regional integration rate, and we see that Latin America is only above Africa. And the gap with respect to the most integrated region, which is the European Union, is of around 20%. And we can even see that from 2010 to 2016, this gap has increased. And also the logistic performance indicator compared to advanced economies, it shows a gap of around 40%. It is not that our region has not evolved. Yes, it did evolve, and it evolved quite a lot. For example, our containers terminal, they have an intra-terminal efficiency which is compatible with the best of the world. But in our logistics system in general, and here we speak about infrastructure and about services, we have some important challenges which we need to overcome. This graph here shows the same logistic performance indicator, and we see that in the upper line we have international leaders, and in the blue line we have the region with the best countries in this area. And to the right-hand side, we have those that are more complicated. So the gap is 39-40%, and this indicator includes service quality, customs service, international shipment traceability, punctuality. So it is a very broad indicator that aims at taking into account the set of topics behind logistics of connectivity. CAF's response to understand and to leverage the countries in the management of their logistics systems, taking into account the fact that we are speaking of at least three layers: an infrastructure layer, and it works for physical connectivity, cables, etc., for digital connectivity, satellites. But we also have services of a private organization behind national logistic. And then we have the governmental regulations applied to this. I mean, when we aim at analyzing this, we have to take all this into account in order to have an idea about the difference of logistic cost. For example, in the Chinese region, 20 years ago, China had an advantage of 25%. Today, it has an advantage of 40%. To understand this from the standpoint of tackling infrastructure, we understand that to comply with the double role of CAF, logistic on one side and integration on the other, the best way to look at Latin America is to check the logistic corridors. This led to a program that is called Logistic Corridors for Integration, which idea is to look at the actions for integration through logistic corridors. So, this is a benchmark that we use at the Secretary of Infrastructure, taking a look at production chains and to leverage the intra-regional routes. This program has existed for 10 years, and it has contributed with ideas and applications in different countries. I'm going to speak about this now. But now we are going to see how can we divide a logistic corridor and how do we approach this. The approach that we want to put in place is one of territorial development, but territorial development focused on the stages and on the parts of a logistic corridor from production areas all the way to the port or to the airport. So that's highly connected to specific topics such as productive chains and the connection with the rest of the region and with the rest of the world. So we start with the main productive scope, considering the cities that are in the routes or that are nearby them. So we consider specific aspects of border environments and also multimodal topics. And a parenthesis here, up to now, Latin America, I mean, we are still talking about multimodality. It is the right discussion, but that goes back to the 80s and to the 90s. Even we have started asking ourselves if synchromodality is the right solution to this, given all the logistic congestion we've gone through very recently. And some people are talking about inverting globalization and to do something nearshoring or offshoring. There is a discussion in the world, and this is resulting from the pandemic and its effect on productive change. So I'm going to close a parenthesis here. So taking a look at the conditions of promoting multimodality in order to reach an environment or a scope of logistic development, integral development, in order to have a port, airport, which will enable the connection with the rest of the world, and the mapping of the corridors follows what's being proposed in order to have an active participation. And we feel proud of being the multilateral bank in Latin America with the largest portfolio when it comes to integration projects. I mean, this approach of logistic corridors, taking into account the different scopes, on part one, it starts with a view on at the corridors of a given region in order to select the specific scope for action and to start looking for something that's very important, which is a roadmap for each one of those scopes or for each one of those spaces. What is a roadmap? It is a process of public and private discussion, looking at the logistic of the region or of the super region in order to see which are the most important interventions from the standpoint of the government, of the private sector, and of the population in general. So with this, to aim at leveraging the efficiency of this corridor. The roadmap gives rise to the end of the analysis. It usually takes from 3 to 6 months. And the result is a set of priority projects, the ones agreed upon between the government, private sector, it gives the planning for logistic or national planning. Here we have an example of an application, practical application in Argentina. It was in 2018 and 2019 that we conducted the basic studies, and then we came up with this priority development program. On Monday in Cartagena, next Monday in the CAF directorate meeting, we're going to approve an important loan in order to have this priority program. And the idea behind this is to make sure that government interventions and the movements of the private sector will be synchronized in the mission of improving the logistic efficiency of a country, of a region, or of a sub-region. In other words, it's just leveraging planning. This is very important, mainly when you are dealing with infrastructure and when you're dealing with these realities, which are of paramount importance for development. In addition to this, there is something which is a weakness that can be found throughout the region, and I'm obsessed with this, mainly with Chile. The topic of pre-investment is a critical theme in the region when it comes to projects that, on one hand, you can use PPPs, or on the other hand, public work. But the idea is for them to produce an effective value based on the money invested. Starting with this, that we have an important weakness in most countries, not only those managed by CAF. We have a program that is called CAF PPI. It's a pre-investment program in infrastructure with the objective of developing new projects for regional integration, and as of that, to have impact on development, mainly those that are very important for a bank. A better planned implementation time. It happens, as it happens with all the multilateral banks, to finance important infrastructure, but with project issues, and an intervention that was planned for 5 years ends up taking 10 years, or even more than 10 years. We have an example here in Colombia. I think it was inaugurated a month ago, and it's La Línea tunnel. I mean, tunnels are special infrastructures with a high level of uncertainty regarding the geological structures. That risk is always there. But we started funding La Línea tunnel before 2010. And now it was just inaugurated. So I can look for other examples in many other countries. In Brazil, for example, we are financing the subway of Sao Paulo with a line that started its planning in 2012, and it should have been ready in the World Cup of 2014. It was financed by a Brazilian bank, then CAF joined, and the commissioning of this subway line is going to be by the end of 2023, early 2024. So that's another example where weak pre-investment explains the main reason for these problems. And pre-planning includes not only engineering design, but the legal part,
Vamos hacer el seguinte, vamos reservar.
and so, for example, $10 million per year in order to do pre-investment in infrastructure and integration complying with the CAF mission. When this money is allocated, is lost fund. It's not a loan. And each project, it really takes a long time. So this program has funded these programs in Panama, Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile. This, for example, submarine cable that is going to connect digitally South America to Australia and then to Asia. This is for digital integration. It's a very important project. We're also working with Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, Colombia, Panama, with an electrical interconnection. And in 2022 or 2023, we are aiming at other lines to define pre-investment. This case of the cable in Chile, the studies followed a schedule, almost a Formula One, and today the international agreements have been entered into to do it with other countries like Brazil. It's under the structuring process. And right after this, we are going to open the bidding process for the concessionaire. But the methodology and the CAF PPI program. They take as base a previous project that is a regional logistic program, which gave rise to a set of publications that is called per log logistic profiles that take into account the logistic profiles based on infrastructure, service, processes, training system, institutional framework, regulation. And we have per log for the entire region. And we have it for all the countries, even though up to now we do not have for Mexico, for Trinidad and Tobago, but we do have it for all the countries of South America. This was the knowledge step put in place by CAF, and it enabled to understand logistic topics in a profound manner and to offer solutions based on these per logs. We have the possibility of evolving to general frameworks for roadmaps as the one that we have used in Argentina. And we have it for all the countries. And then you have to select the priorities from the logistics standpoint. And I'm going to briefly cover this. This is a vision of all the products that we have in this program, because it is important to move forward this. This is seen in the broad sense of a logistic corridor. Those large cities which have ports, they have been considered here. And for strategic cities, we not only do the access of the logistic corridor, but also of the urban logistic, which is something else that we take into account in the region. For example, Callao. Callao has an important logistic community in Peru, but the organization and the planning of urban logistic is just not there. For those who have visited Callao, they have a chaotic urban system, as is the case of many other cities of the region. For example, the Sao Paulo, Santos road. So, we have to take a look at the urban logistic. So we need to add this to logistic corridors. So, it's going to be the corridors in the countries and in the cities. And we also analyzed the different products through time for the different sectors that we manage. For ports and airports, we published this in 2016, and it's a view on the sector. Obviously, we've done this separated, and that's up to 2040. We did the same thing with railways, roads, and with logistic in general, taking a look at the topic of logistic platform. We identified gaps. We have the figures there on when the studies were conducted. We always make some corrections on when are we going to focus on this. But for example, ports in 2016, we identified 134 expansion projects as key projects and the scope for the regional logistic, with investment of around $55 billion. And here in two maps, what we are seeing in 2014 and how are we forecasting 2040. Obviously, something happened in these past 2 years, which is the pandemic. And obviously, all the changes stemming from the pandemic. But for example, if you take a look at this, in 2014, we have 6 ports above 2 million containers per year. Oh, not containers, TEUs. And our view on 2040, we were going to have more than 20 ports with these characteristics. So the preparation for this increase in demand has to come together with ports, but as you know, not only with ports, but it's with all the logistics system, even the access to ports, dredging, etc. So this requires an important planning, and CAF elements are to leverage this planning. And also a view on the future port. And this one has 5 axes: integration with the logistic chain, promotion of maritime traffic, efficiency, competitiveness, operational competitiveness, and mainly sustainability, which nowadays need to be seen based on a broad resilience that will consider the environmental topic and also climate change, biodiversity. So we are the region with more biodiversity in the world, and we cannot kill our natural capital. So the biodiversity related topic is key here. And today, CAF is having a Barranquilla, a debate on biodiversity in the cities. But in addition to environmental topics, climate change and biodiversity, we also have to take into account the social topics in such a way that interventions and planning will take into account what's more important, and that's the people. And in this scope, we have to take into account integrity-related topics. The region has been, quote unquote, punished by integrity topics. And also legal security topics. And this broad view is also used for the port industry. In addition to this, with the economic system of Latin America, we have put in place a network of digital ports. I mean, in the previous panel, they talked about digitization. And this is the step to promote a common vision, not only based on port digitization strategy, but also digitization of authorities which intervene in the ports. Today, this program gathers 28 ports in 13 countries throughout the region, and together with CELA, we want to institutionalize this. It is to transform this network into an institution with its own life. Obviously, with all the ports of the region, to have like an additional discussion forum on these strategic topics related to digitization of logistics and of processes. Moreover, we are also engaging in researching the possibility of the waterways and mainly those that are heading towards the Atlantic, which in Colombia they have an important challenge, which is the Magdalena River. But based on that, you can have a very interesting logistic that gathers Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina, and also Bolivia with Brazil, obviously depending on the water basins that we can have tackling this, taking into account that it's a multinational solution, but you can have the same, your own solutions. For example, the waterway of Paraná, Paraguay, and to have a multinational PPP. For example, if the countries have different laws and different contracting frameworks, etc. An example, in the electrical system, we have the establishment of multinational companies and in a more modern way with open capital. This could be the response in order to have private operations.
In a broader sense, in important waterways with leverage integration and logistics efficiency of the region. Here we have part of the projects we've looked at and amounts, reference amounts of investment, especially along these four pillars in the region and other corners of Latin America. Well, this is the end of my message. Of course, we have an important portfolio in terms of ports, and especially with port terminals financed via project finance. We have a very interesting relation with the port of Bahia Blanca in Argentina, where we finance the dredging and where we're having lessons of specific organization, institutional organization this port has. And of course, there we have the challenge of deepening not only the financing but also the knowledge of the new challenges, and especially, which is the challenge that I've put before my team. Maybe one of you knows Rafael Portarroyo, which normally attends these congresses on ports. But my challenge to them was this: let's understand as most as possible what happened with this logistics blockage, especially in the northern hemisphere, which is still today. Let's look at the causes and let's see how we can incorporate this in the possible solutions in our vision of sustainability, going beyond environmental matters. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and warm greetings to everyone.